Well, good afternoon, VANPOD number 7, lucky number 7, and we're here today with Michael Mulcahy here on the Van Podcast, and you can find your Van Podcast on Apple, Google, or wherever podcasts are shown. So welcome, Michael Mulcahy.
Thanks for having me, Michael.
Yeah, I was saying this is the second time we've had another Michael. So
Magic Michaels.
right, my wife said you can never have enough Irish, Italians, Catholics running around, so, it's good to have you, and how things been? How's your summer going?
My summer's good. Been really active. A lot of domestic travel, which has been fun. Seen some of the other states. Saw a couple of new ballparks this year, and so that was cool. Tiger Stadium,
Okay.
Wrigley. It's been a nice summer. Saw the kids quite a bit, so that's always a good thing.
Yeah. So you've been doing a lot of travel, and you're a big sports fan. I guess we're all getting ready for baseball season to wind up, football season to start. So Michael, like I, are both avid football fans. So looking forward to seeing you at a few games, hopefully.
Can we say that we're Raider fans?
We can. That's encouraged on this show, actually.
Okay, good.
Yeah, as he stares at my crest across the way there that most people who've been here seen. But, well, welcome. I thought today, Willow Glen is obviously both of our homes. And I know you're deeply connected with Willow Glen, and I'm excited to kind of have our, listeners and viewers get to know a little bit more about you and all the things in your family have done here. So, maybe to start, maybe a little bit of background on Michael Mulcahy and where he grew up and why he's still in San Jose.
Born and raised in San Jose, Willow Glen specifically. We were always really anchored in this community. My great-grandparents came here in 1888 to Willow Glen, actually. So we've been around a long time. I went to school locally, St. Chris, Bellarmine. And then I went to San Jose State for 2 years, and then I transferred to USC. Got to LA, spent 3+ years there, and knew I wanted to come back to San Jose and start my career.
Now, there's a few famous sons that were with you at San Jose State. I remember you telling me in a fraternity that I think everybody knows.
Yes, Bill Barron, who many of our listeners probably know, was the fraternity president.
Of course,
when I pledged, and Bill is not only one of my best and closest friends today, but also a business partner here at Willow Glen. So, Bill, Pat Quinn, probably a few people will know from San Jose Country Club, Block Construction. Pat and I incidentally went to Bellarmine together, and then we were pledge brothers at San Jose State. So,
did either one of them haze you?
Well,
or can you say that?
No, they hazed me as adults now, but no, not at that time.
Yeah.
But the other one is my cousin John DiNapoli was an ATO at USC, and so when I transferred to SC, John was not only the best man in my wedding and one of my closest friends and first cousin, but he was my fraternity brother when we got to SC together. So that was pretty cool too.
Well, that's what's so cool about your background. Of course, your last name is Mulcahy, but if you're obviously a DiNapoli as well, and the Napoli has a long history in San Jose. And even as a young man, I remember working at the grocery stores, and at the time the canneries were still open, but a lot of people don't know about that history as much in present day San Jose. But the DiNapolis were actually in the canning business, and that eventually led into the real estate business. And maybe you could talk a little bit about the Sun Garden Fruit Company and all the things that they were involved with.
Sure. Well, a tip of the hat to my mother's father, Frank DiNapoli. So my mother is Shirley DiNapoli Shiro. She's the middle sister of an older brother, Dick DiNapoli, who has since passed, and her younger brother, Phil DiNapoli, who many of our listeners will probably know. And their father, along with Joe Perici, founded a canning company, actually bought one in bankruptcy in the late 30s, Bichelli Brothers, over on North First Street, Monterey Road as we know it, and became Sun Garden Packing Company. And then in addition to that, they had Mayfair Packing. So Sun Garden was predominantly tomato products, but did other vegetables and then apricots when they were in season, end of summer. And then And then Mayfair was primarily dried fruit packing company. We don't own either business anymore, but we still have great legacies to that. We still have a DiNapoli brand of products that you'll see on most grocery shelves, as well as Bianco DiNapoli, which is a partnership with Chris Bianco, the famous pizza maker.
Oh, yeah.
That's an organic brand that's really hit it off big time and kind of nationally now recognized, which is cool. But we also own some of the land, obviously, that we had. Back in the day, if you had a, canning business and you needed a warehouse to store cans, you could go out and buy a piece of dirt and build a building and occupy it within 5 months, practically.
Boy, what a great day that was.
Right. So as a result of that, we're very fortunate to have a pretty sizable warehouse portfolio in central San Jose as a result of that.
Yeah.
We've continued to invest in District 7, and so we've been there for a very long time.
Very long time. And actually, when your family bought that the fruit packing company back then from that, I guess at the time it was a little down and out, and then the war actually kind of jump-started that whole kind of canning process again, right?
Yeah, it's sort of the ugly benefit of being in a war. Sun Garden was put on the map because all the GIs carried 2-ounce cans of stewed tomatoes as a sack, and government contracts really, much like the defense industry in this valley, it built, a sizable program for canned foods.
It really did. My great uncle Dante, my Prandy, he actually had that ration, and he was very proud of it because it was from San Jose.
Oh, that's great.
And that, to be honest, I was probably about 12 years old. That was the first time I'd heard the DiNapoli name, and then that led into my Italian grandfather telling me the whole story about the packing company.
Well, you talk about how a lot of people don't necessarily know about the heritage of packing in this valley. It really, the Valley of Heart's Delight, wasn't by accident.
Right.
It was, bountiful orchards and fields of great product, and we had dozens and dozens of packing plants. I mean, it's really hard for me now to go anywhere without somebody saying, "Oh, I had a family member who worked at Sun Garden or Mayfair."
Sure.
Generations of families were affected by that, by the canneries. Probably a lot like, 20 years from now, we'll say, "Oh, we met at Google," or, "Hey, we met at Facebook," right?
If they come back to work.
Yeah,
if they don't come back to work, we gotta remember.
Let's hope they do very soon.
Yeah. Well, it's funny on that, the Valley of Heart's Delight, if you go to Oak Ridge Mall, right by Living Spaces, they've just created this beautiful mural. And my wife said, wow, that was one of the taglines. My wife being from Pleasanton, California. She goes, wow, that was a tagline for San Jose back then. I said, yeah. And actually, I thought about my grandfather. I thought about this interview and all those things. And gosh, that was a few taglines ago. But your family's deep-rooted history in there is fantastic. And so, I guess that influence of your family owning warehouses, all kinds of different, parts of San Jose, did that get your interest and pique your interest in real estate? Or what was your kind of first passions coming out of high school and college?
Well, I have a few really great influences in my life that I sort of really hold on to, and one of them is the Children's Musical Theater, and where I grew up performing. My sister brought a flyer home from St. Christopher School one day about this organization that was just starting up at St. Francis Cabrini that ended up being the now 56-year-old Children's Musical Theater San Jose. So early on, I was a sport. Yeah, I played baseball and, all the requisite sports, but I also did theater at the same time. And it really was a great love and continues to be a great passion. And sometimes hobby for me. I still get up on the stage now and again, but, I would say that was, one of those things that I always will remember as a great influence and continues to be today.
Because you were the executive officer there for how many years?
Well, I started performing there in 1970. And I was a baby. Yeah. And all the way through high school at Bellarmine, and then while I was still in town when I was going to state. And then I went away to SC. And when I came back to San Jose, I joined the board of the organization. You know, we were always really taught to be involved in the community and really weren't told. We were sort of taught by example, our parents, you know, and I say that my mom and her brothers and their spouses all demonstrated, it was an important thing to do, to be involved, whether it be serve on a board or, work at certain places that were benefiting the community. And so I kind of had that spirit. So when I came home, joined the board, I was on the board for a few years while I was working at CB, back then Coldwell Banker Commercials out of college. And as a broker, we sort of hit the skids in late 90s, I guess we could say.
Yeah.
So I made a jump and went to become the executive director at CMT, where I spent 8 years really embedded in the community. And it's the hardest job I've ever had to replace.
Yeah.
Because it really was an amazing experience.
Well, and you also were responsible for finding their longtime home. I know I would imagine back then there was very difficult probably to find places for this to be a permanent home.
Yeah.
How did that come about? I know you.
Well, we did it twice, Michael. We did it once in 97 when Gordon Biersch moved into 9th and Taylor Street there in San Jose.
Yeah.
We were in the building next door, and the planning department, in its infinite wisdom, decided that we didn't fit the zoning after the decade that we'd been there.
Interesting.
So we ended up moving in partnership with the Swenson family, tip of the hat to Case and his family, over to Parkmore and Meridian.
Yep.
And we enjoyed being there for, what's the math on that, 20 plus years. And then when the Avenues School was looking to locate a campus into San Jose, they ended up buying that site from Swenson, or partly.
Yeah.
But it forced a move for us. So my wife's and my COVID project, my wife Kimberly, we were asked to chair a campaign in late 2019 with the Children's Theater to raise $2.5 million to move their facility across the street to Parkmore and Meridian. And we launched the campaign in January of 2020. And we all know what happened in the middle of March.
Well, at least people were home.
Exactly.
You know where to find them.
We did. And, it's funny you say that, because the organization kind of did these, every week did a town hall.
Okay.
And we basically had to give updates on how the state of the organization, and everybody knew we were moving, and kind of had a real, calendar working against us there. And it was really cool because we kind of put a pause on the campaign right after we started it. But it was about middle of April, we had a town hall. And right after that, we got an unsolicited donation of $50,000. And we gathered our crew, our cabinet, and said, we have believers out there. We need to do this. By the end of that summer, we'd raised almost half the money.
Wow.
And we ended up raising all of that money.
All during COVID.
All during COVID.
Wow.
And we built out the site so that by the time some of the county orders and so forth, mellowed out, we were able to bring people back into the building right at the time that they were able to do that, because we kept pushing. And so that spirit of CMT, that spirit of San Jose and this community and this region really rose up to make that happen. So that was an incredible experience.
You're one of the few people, really, a credit to you and your family, but you in particular, that really galvanizes and brings people together fast. It's a credit to you, because what you just summarized is not easy to do. And I feel like while there's a great deal of wealth in this wonderful city that we live, not that many people practice what they preach. And maybe that's just because of the sign of the times and the way the world is today. But, you're one of the legacies in your family that actually pushes the arts, that makes places better. So as a native son, I deeply appreciate that and what your entire family does for that.
It's really kind of you to say thank you.
Yeah,
I appreciate that.
Yeah, well, I mean, you've also along the way gotten some great advice from some of your family members, and kind of bringing it back to where we're at today. Which I do want to come back to your past a little bit because I have to ask you about why you ran for mayor, but we'll put that aside for a minute. But you got some good advice about real estate from some close people in your family that really has led you to kind of where you are today. So maybe, you could tell us about some of that advice and why you're here in Willow Glen.
Yeah, I would say that, like when I was young, working in the family business meant you were driving a forklift at the cannery. And really getting up at 5 and, being done by...
Still getting up at 5.
Oh, yeah. Still up like that. So the example of like real estate wasn't, that wasn't really the driver for me. Although, my father was in it. My mother's family was in it. It wasn't clear to me that that's what I was going to do. When I was at CMT, actually, and this was after I was a broker, right? I was a broker out of college, and I loved doing that. It was a brutal economy when I was in it. And as soon as I left, the market took off. So there must have been something.
Maybe you should leave again.
Yeah, I should leave again. Exactly. I should leave my work right now. But while I was still at CMT, this building on Lincoln Avenue became available. And my mother, Shirley DiNapoli-Shiro, who is 95 this year and still living in her house and
God bless her,
still giving sage advice with a little less Italian flavor to it, just very gentle these days.
That's good. You could talk to my mom.
She always would talk about, trying to get her father to buy something on Lincoln Avenue. She has raised all of her children here. She's the only really one of her siblings that stayed in San Jose. And this building came available and we ended up being successful in buying it. And it was where Aki Restaurant is. Sure. That was back in the day when you could blow a cannon on Lincoln Avenue and nobody would ever blink an eye.
Well, unless you were at Sharky's.
Unless you were at Sharky's. Which, Michael, that's a whole other podcast. That'll be like podcast 100.
That'll have some drinks in front of you.
Yes, exactly. And it just started this great opportunity for my, specifically my mother's family that I have direct responsibility over our investments and so forth on. And, we've ended up buying, I think we have 11 buildings on Lincoln Avenue, including the Bank of America down at the middle of the block, which is a great future opportunity.
Yeah.
And, we've just had a blast. There have been some, tough years that I think we've all had, but it has been, I feel really grateful that we've had a chance to help kind of craft a future for Lincoln Avenue and create some real stalwart businesses and build upon some great bones that the district has.
You really have. I mean, when you mention these 11 buildings, that includes also your next gen, office space, right? Brandenburg Stadler Moore and your dear friend and partner, Mr. Barron, and
right.
Obviously, what you've been behind the table and the Garden Theater, and that has to be one of the tougher, real estates to keep occupied. Yet, when a tenant comes in, you always seem to have a tenant goes out, a tenant always seems to come back in. And I know that's not easy. Right. And so I know how hard it is to get tenants into space. And you've just done a masterful job here and created really this southern part of the avenue now, in my opinion, is headed, to another level, which we can get into in a while. But I mean, you're one of the larger property owners here, arguably. What's your feeling of the state of Willow Glen and the avenue right now? And what's first from the business side, and then kind of globally about how you think it's going today in 2023.
I mean, I think COVID was hard on Lincoln Avenue for sure, as it was for everybody trying to learn how to do your business in a whole new environment, whether you're a restaurant or a retailer, right? And we're talking mostly about small business operators, that aren't, taking some edict from some corporate office somewhere. Yeah. These are real people making real, decisions about their business. And, we own a variety of types of real estate. Lincoln Avenue is where all of my siblings that live in this valley live. We all can walk to the avenue. So we take it very seriously. It's important to us. It's emotional work for us. I love the creativity of Lincoln Avenue and trying to sort of design within our own little pod here at Lincoln and Willow and so forth, what tenants sort of fit together. And in a time and a period like COVID and in the aftermath, you don't have as much to sort of choose from in order to do that. And so I think in terms of retail generally, Lincoln Avenue and places like these central business districts, which are genuine, organic little districts that places like Santana Row are trying to sort of create out of a big building block of their own.
Yeah.
We have some organic opportunities here that those corporate, places don't have. But we also have a lot of the challenges that come from not having the same owners of every street, because I see the whole district as one. What we do at our end of the avenue, anything that we do, bad or good, has an effect on what happens at the other end of the avenue. In my view.
Sure.
Because any tenant or consumer driving around looking for a place to eat or a shop to go to, my place could look as good as anywhere. But, if another spot doesn't look great, it has an effect on both. It's a curb appeal. It's an aesthetic issue. When you go to the Valley Fair Mall or you go to Santana Row or you name it, kind of under one management type of place, they can kind of gerrymander all of those looks and
they can use cash into it.
And so, I hope that our constituency and customers kind of see this as a different animal, meaning that we're not all under one management. But I think all of us as property owners and business owners need to think about how we can behave better that way. Because a dirty storefront on one end of the street has an effect on everybody else.
It does.
Or a, beat up awning or a vacancy for that matter.
It does.
And so I think we got great bones. I think we've got great legacy here in Willow Glen. But I think we need to pull all the resources, the business association, the neighborhood association, the District 6 council member's office, the City of San Jose departments that have some responsibilities here on Lincoln Avenue. We've got to galvanize and make sure that we're putting our best foot forward for Lincoln Avenue, our prospective businesses that we want to come here, and the prospective customer.
Well, you mentioned prospective businesses that want to come here, and I have a teenage son, and he's now kind of exploring the world. He says, "Dad, why do you have so many coffee shops in Lincoln Avenue, but you don't have maybe somewhere to shop that's maybe the easiest one would be a Gap or an Old Navy or something that maybe a teenager like that would find appealing." And I guess that gets back to some of these larger corporate tenants, without the exception of maybe like Rite Aid and a few others that have located. Why do you think that we don't have some of the commercial appeal to the larger, tenants that have the, maybe the financial backing to do some of the things you're talking about?
So this is a tough nut to crack, and it has been. We've been investing since '95 in Willow Glen. We've probably had the most share of, call it corporate tenant.
Yeah.
I believe, and I don't think Willow Glen thinks this way anymore. When we did BevMo, I think they wanted to run me out of town because, it was a giant liquor store and, oh my gosh, it's the end of the world.
Right.
You probably can't find anybody these days who was ever against that.
I don't know anybody.
Yeah, but I believe we got to have a balance of some corporate, call them nationals, regionals, along with our small business operators that are locally owned. I mean, that is our bread and butter. I think part of the reason we don't get as much of the looks from the larger groups is the type of real estate that we have doesn't necessarily suit the cookie cutter kind of, 75 foot deep by 20 feet wide, 1,500 square foot space.
Yeah.
Our stock is old. And so it requires an investment by our property owners to be well suited for a tenant of that caliber that might pay a little bit higher rent than, normal. So if you don't make that investment, you're going to take a tenant who's willing to pay a little less rent. It's not a judgment on the quality of those tenants. It's just the facts and the numbers of how our real estate works.
Right.
So I think as we cycle through some of the ownership, meaning that people decide like, hey, I don't want to own this building anymore, and they sell it, likely that buyer is going to be someone who's willing to sort of invest in Lincoln Avenue. I mean, let's face it, Michael, what you did with your 2-story office building at the corner of Lincoln and Willow that will now have a, recognized restaurateur and backing of a formidable restaurateur and the Mendel family, that's a really big win for Lincoln Avenue. Not just the development of a corner that was a gas station, but the activation of it, the girth and the sort of the 2-story nature of it, the outdoor eating element of it. And that's going to bring a ton of energy and excitement to the avenue. So like a guy like me who owns the kitty corner to you, and the Table Restaurant and Lamella Tavern right next door, we welcome that.
Sure.
I want new investment. We need new investment. And I believe that really, you're sort of staking the future by doing what you did. We've been waiting for more of that for a long time.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I appreciate that. And I think it's not possible without what you've done. And, you're right. It does require, new investment by new ideas, new money. And that's not easy. I mean, it's sometimes we sit back and say like, oh gosh, if I, go on social media, everyone's got the right answer about what should be where. And then you get into the granular nature of how difficult these projects are just to do a tenant improvement or just to get an inspection from the city in an appropriate time. It's really difficult. And that's why it's fun to be in Willow Glen, because it seems like Willow Glen has, farther to go. I mean, both physically on the avenue expansion itself, and then, like you said, in between spaces, which you're going into. And so with that being said, I the city of San Jose, which on this program, sometimes we applaud them and sometimes we have criticism for them, rightfully so. But one of the things I think the city of San Jose is trying to accomplish, and I know you're in the middle of this as I am as well, is that they look at the business districts as a place to create more mixed use. And I'm wondering, when I say mixed use, I'm talking about putting in housing.
Right.
What's your feelings on that? Because I think there's an allowable about 200 units a year within business districts. I think there's 13 business districts in this great city, this being the best one. But what's your feeling about how that can have an effect if we create a little bit more mixed use opportunity?
Can I just say yes?
Well, of course.
I mean, yes. And I think, I always say, to restaurants, the lunch business sort of is up and down. And, part of that is because we don't have enough people that work in the district, right? So there's not enough office space.
Right.
We have a small amount of office space, but enough to be a little bit of a bellwether. And even through COVID, we were fully occupied on our office space. I think that speaks to the fact that, with or without COVID, having an office that's sort of in an area where you can walk to get food or, shop or whatever, is important. I think that we have a great opportunity to have, people that live on Lincoln Avenue, above coffee shops, above, the restaurants.
Yes.
And it's super difficult to, kind of one-off that kind of a deal.
Yeah.
We've done it. We've looked at doing it 3 times on Lincoln Avenue, but we always stop short, just because the limitations of the current way that, the general plan works. It just doesn't offer great opportunities for developers. And that's not really a slap at San Jose. I think what we suffer from on Lincoln Avenue, 30 years ago when we started investing, nobody at City Hall really wanted to deal with Willow Glen. They were organized, they were loud, and, they were probably seen sometimes by.
You're talking about the
saying
neighborhood
that-
association. Yeah.
Well, no, not even the association, just the population in general. It's not a slam on who they were or what they were.
Sure.
But they were noticed, right?
Yeah.
And so
It's factual.
city staff didn't really want to go up against.
It's true.
Right? It was a headache.
That's true.
I think we have different, I think we have a different population of people thinking now that they've seen that Santana Row wasn't the end of the world, or that other places that have done mixed use that, it didn't fall off a cliff.
Yeah.
I think that there's a much greater sense that, wow, that could work here. I mean, the road diet. I mean,
Yeah.
probably could find a lot of people against the road diet, but I'm not sure they would lay down in the street to block it from happening like they were willing to do before.
That's true.
And I think that, if the city would take a broader look at land use on Lincoln Avenue and stretch it past Willow going north and take it all the way to the 280 bridge and meet up with all the great work that Sobrato and you guys have done out there, because that is the gateway to a lot of bodies who don't have anywhere else to go to shop, eat, drink, whatever.
That's right.
Right? So that sort of connection out to even more rooftops would really benefit the Lincoln Avenue district.
I completely agree. And hopefully at some point, we'll have a general plan update and we can maybe organize property owners for that effect. I mean, I think that is exactly the vision for the long-term sustainability of this avenue.
Right.
It really does. But, absent that and the current event and even future, challenges, what are you concerned about? What keeps you up at night about the avenue right now as a property owner? I mean, I have my haunted vision of things, but what are some of the constraints that you see right now that are, either that worry you long-term or that make you concerned that the viability of Willow Glen could be impinged at some point?
I've just, mentioned before that we've done some travel. We just came back from Chicago.
Yeah,
right?
great city. My favorite town.
Kind of hung around the magnificent
Mike out of town.
Yeah, Mike out of town. And, it was like Chamber of Commerce weather. What I love about Chicago, and again, you can walk 3 blocks and get into a little bit of grit and grind.
Yep.
But for the most part, there's real intention around green space and streetscape. The store owners care about what's happening out in front of their shops. It's kind of in the government edict that we're going to make this a green city.
Yeah.
And I don't know who's taking care of the planters, whether it's on a government contract or the building owners themselves, but it looks spectacular.
It does.
Now, I was there in late July, August, right, when weather is hot and everything's blooming, but it looked like people cared.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time in New York City. Again, you can be in certain areas that you look like you don't want to be there.
Yeah.
But for the most part, there's a sense that there's responsibility. You see shopkeepers, sweeping off their front porch and so forth. And it just sort of says to me, like, we have opportunity in Willow Glen.
Yeah.
And I think we need to do a good job, Michael, of convening people.
Yeah.
And you and I are as involved as most people, but we need to pull together, as I mentioned before, there's lots of different city departments that you could go after. But I think we, the people, need to figure out how we can take care of our own selves first before we start saying, city, we need more of this. I'm going to have a meeting with all of my property, with all my tenants that have a storefront. And that includes those that have a storefront inside the Garden Theater. And basically say, look, we have to take responsibility for the cleanliness of our own shop. And that means outside our front door.
Yeah.
Right? If you see something, say something, and here's how to do it. If you see trash, pick it up.
Yeah.
If there's something that we can do with, the janitorial service or the Willow Glen Business Association's contract that they have with their maintenance folks, we need to do a better job of convening people, telling them how to get the attention and help that they need, but hold them accountable for the things that they can control within their own business and within their own storefront. I think until we do that, we have to be sort of self-reflective on how much blame we're going to put on some other agency. Now, when it comes to safety and all of that, there's nothing more important for Willow Glen, I think.
Well, they're hand in glove. The issues are tied together.
I agree.
Yeah.
Blight will breed misbehavior and bad acts.
Amen. Yeah.
And so I think, the original concept of convening people to be better custodians themselves is critically important.
Well, I will say this. You practice what you preach. I think you and I give ourselves virtual high fives on the different sides of Lincoln as we're picking up trash along the way. But I've seen you stringing lights. I've seen you changing garbage. I've seen you with your tenants. I've actually been in Hammer and Nails. I've seen you running through there, helping them do things. So I love the practice which you preach. That's really what draws me to you, and that at the end of the day, you're not afraid to roll up your sleeves and get in there. And that's the message. And a lot of times tenants will say, well, look, that's what I'm paying CAMs for. I'm paying the landlord to keep things clean, but we can't be everywhere at every time, and we need to hold them accountable. And I think what keeps me up at night is the latter, and you've made the connection beautifully. Because if you're not taking care of your storefront, if you're not running a good business, you will, in today's San Jose, invite the undesirables. And it seems that's what keeps me up at night a little bit. It's a countywide issue. We don't have to get into it too much, but I do feel that over the last 4 years to 5 years, there has been a different feel that the unhoused and the less fortunate, they're members of our society, and we need to treat them with dignity. But there is crime, there is blight that is associated with that, and so that's what's keeping me up at night. I don't know if that's
I didn't mean to gloss over that piece of it, and I want to assure.
Same from my perspective.
This is a safe, environment. Yeah. But like everywhere in this city and state, we've got those challenges. I kind of think about it this way. There's been some discussion about these gateways in San Jose.
Yes.
And I've been talking about gateways since I ran for mayor, I think, about how important they are to these different, areas that are kind of real gathering points. Willow Glen, I just saw Team San Jose, which manages the convention and cultural facilities, just did a piece and featured Willow Glen, and they call it the Jewel of San Jose. But I don't know that that the other bodies, the county, the state, the Union Pacific Railroad, Caltrans, or the city of San Jose necessarily help us in that regard. So when you think about, coming off of 87, and that entry line, which is a major gateway down Willow Street, it looks unsafe. It does. It looks like it's sort of unhinged there, and that is a major gateway.
It really is. I'm trying to develop that, by the way.
What's that?
I'm trying to develop that.
Well, I hope you too, because I think that's one of the key things to cure some of these issues. But we've got to get after, from that broader scope standpoint, the entry points to this region. I always laugh, like, you go to other cities and it points you right to, historic downtown, you name it.
Right.
We don't have a sign that says
we don't
downtown Willow Glen shopping district.
Goodness, that's a good point.
Wayfinding. I think I tried to do that 10 years ago and got shut out by Department of Transportation.
Oh, DOT.
Some reason. But I think that's an easy missed opportunity for.
I think the only way, maybe to your point, the only way finding sign that I know is when you go underneath the trestle at Bird, there and it says "Welcome to Willow Glen." I think that's the only one.
That may be true, but probably the most important one is the table sign at the corner of Willow, right? Yeah. Which basically says in neon, "Here you are."
Yeah.
We need more of that spirit and wayfinding to tell people you've arrived. And then once they've arrived, we've got work to do to make them feel safe, comfortable, and accommodated.
I appreciate that. And I love that idea because wayfinding in most new developments is such an important part. And you're right. I mean, as I sit here thinking about it today, we don't have that, but it's exactly what we need to do. And I know you're innovating that, all the time. Um, you know, you've been a civic leader, on so many different levels. And you ran for mayor. I just have to ask, why did you run for mayor? Why did you do that? I mean, because listening to you talk right now, I'm like, gosh, you just have such a pragmatic viewpoint, which I think is the best characteristic of any local elected official. But is this why you wanted to run for mayor back when you did?
I was 40. I was 39 when I decided.
You're only like 39 right now?
I know. I haven't aged. But I have a lot of experience since. And I know that it's a tough job. And whether it's Chuck Reed, Sam Liccardo, or, today's Matt Mahan.
Yeah.
It's a tough job. I think it's tougher today than it was then.
Yeah.
I was inspired to run because I thought San Jose could be better, could do better, and had a better future than it was sort of laying out.
Yeah.
So much dissension. The whole business labor battle was preventing San Jose from being its best self.
Still is.
And, I was an outsider. I hadn't, run before. I hadn't been in elected office. But I was in the community, working for the community. My wife, when we first got married, and even before we got married, worked for Susan Hammer for a number of years. So we were embedded, and I felt a duty to serve. And I mean that sincerely. I wasn't planning to be a career politician. Everybody said, oh, you really got to pay your dues and be a council member first. And I, have many colleagues and friends that have served as council members. And I know you're one vote on a Tuesday, which you are only as the mayor too. But you can really set a course and direction. But I think the challenges and ills of major metropolitan cities are, bigger than any one person's vision or desire.
Yeah.
And we got to figure out a way for San Jose, selfishly just San Jose. If we could figure it out, that would be great. To figure out one thing that we can all row in the same direction on.
True.
One thing. Pick the aesthetics of San Jose. It's really hard to find one sort of unblemished spot in the city of San Jose outside of some of our incredibly beautiful neighborhoods. But commercially, it's difficult.
Yeah.
And I just really hope that the city can galvanize itself and find ways to focus on a few things that, the population will look around and say, wow, we've really made marked improvement there.
Yeah. Well, you're doing that every day, believe it or not. And I think that you practice what you preach, and you have some, I think, long-term views that not a lot of people enjoy, only because I think as a native son, you've seen generations, not just in your lifetime, but in your family's lifetime. It's been fantastic. Well, look, as we kind of hit the end here, and this has been fascinating, I appreciated your time. I wanted to throw a couple just rapid fire. And usually what I do is I just kind of probably a name or a situation. So I don't know.
God.
Yeah. Well, they'll be softballs. So
All right.
I like to compliment, keep people comfortable here. Unless you're Susan Ellenberg, who doesn't like compliments. I tried to compliment her, Susan, if you're listening. But I love her. She didn't like the compliments. I love to compliment people. But all right. So here we go. So let's go with the first one. Alex Byer.
Good guy. Baseball fan. Newlywed, and I think, really did the first major development in Willow Glen, ground up at the corner of Lincoln and Willow.
Yeah.
And, responsible owner. I feel really fortunate that he mirrors our property ownership right across the street.
Yeah.
And, A+.
A+, yeah. Inspiration to me as well for this whole building here. So I wanted to start off with him and give him a shout out. The Oakland, Las Vegas, Los Angeles Raiders.
Oh, I thought you were going to say the A's.
No, God, no.
That's a hard one to talk about.
Oh, we'd be here all day.
So look, I was a Raider fan. My dad when I was young, the youngest of five, and we're now seven. I have two incredible stepsisters that make us seven. But I have two brothers, older. And when I was a baby, pretty much, when the Raiders and A's moved to town, my dad decided, hey, I'm going to get season tickets to the Giants and the Niners. And he couldn't get anything good. So he got Raiders and A's tickets. So I grew up a Raiders and A's from way back. So I suffered through when they moved to L.A., but then I went to school in L.A. I used to go to Raider games on Sundays by myself because no one would go with
Compton, nice.
Yeah, I'd buy a 50-yard line seat and sit at the top of the nosebleed at Memorial Coliseum.
Yeah.
And then they come back, and it was, great to have them back. The stadium sucked.
Yeah.
And now they're in Vegas, and I'm still a Raider fan because I've been accustomed to following the team and not necessarily the city, and feel bad for Oakland. But, when you have them, you got to make hay and, talk about a city that couldn't really figure out how to make that happen. But
we could nonetheless whole year on that subject.
Nonetheless, I'm a Jimmy G fan.
Yes.
And hoping for the best. It's always best to be a Raider fan in preseason.
Oh, of course. We're undefeated.
Yes.
Hammer and nails.
Hammer and nails. It is like the best kept secret in San Jose.
I agree.
So I'm not going to out somebody here, but I will say I was just at this, boondoggle with some buddies. Men need to get pedicured.
Bingo.
Especially in California where you want to wear open-toe shoes.
Thank you.
Men need to get pedicured.
Did you hear that, man?
Oh, my goodness. And, you go into Hammer and Nails, you sit in the back, they'll give you a whiskey or a soda, whatever you want. And, you sit there for an hour and a half and,
watch TV,
think about life and what you're going to do next. And, probably make whoever is your significant other really happy because you've gotten a pedicure and a manicure.
On Shark Tank, I love it when it came through here. I saw actually the episode on it. When it came through, I was so excited.
Yeah,
thank you for bringing that.
Yeah, the owner, Jim, is a really good guy. He was building in the middle of COVID. We really worked with him to make sure that they could get open and stay open. And it's been a great thing. But men, please be better. Yeah,
please. I agree. I go. My wife will kick me out of bed, for God's sakes. Make it happen, guys. And it's affordable. So this is a double one because it's two of my favorite spots in Willow Glen. Obviously, it's a person and a place.
Okay.
The person is Jim Stump.
Oh.
The place though is Lamella.
Thank you.
Yeah, which is my favorite champagne bar in all of California.
Well, thank you, Michael. That's cool. So Jim Stump is one of those people in your life that when you sort of reflect back on your life and you think about the influences on you and just having known them, Jim and his wife, Angelique, as well, and his whole family are just salt of the earth, hardworking as can be people. I met Jim 12 years ago before the table was opened, obviously. He wanted to do a grill there. And it was after he had come out of AP Stumps and it was going to be his first venture. And I said, no, man, my wife will never go for it because we wanted a place where you could eat late.
Yep.
You could drink late and you could feel comfortable as a group of women to go, have a time. And so we came up at the table and that was awesome. We've done a few places together since. And as an investor, I'm a property owner in. And we always wanted to do a higher end lounge. Cocktail lounge, small plates.
Yeah.
We tried 3 different times in buildings that we own on Lincoln. It just didn't come through. And some dear friends of ours who had a juice place on the avenue, the O'Hara family, in the middle of COVID, when COVID hit, they had a decision to make whether they renewed their lease or leave, and they decided not to reopen. And fortuitous for us, it's my favorite building that we own on Lincoln Avenue, just because the bones are so good.
There it is.
And so I called Jim Stump immediately and said, we're going to do our cocktail lounge. And that was our COVID project. Other than the fundraising we did for CMT, a lot of time spent on triage with tenants, but then we opened the Lamella business. So Lamella Tavern, name comes from the ceiling structure. It's a barrel ceiling tied together by a diamond-shaped pattern. And it's really quite beautiful and kind of rare.
Yeah.
A lot of older warehouses just have them. But for Willow Glen, it was kind of rare. And so I was in there one day. My favorite place to go in New York is a place called Minetta Tavern.
Okay.
And we were throwing all kinds of names around. And I was in there by myself one day, and I was thinking Lamella, Minetta Tavern, Lamella Tavern. I said, the democratic process is over. Our restaurant is called Lamella Tavern.
There you go.
So we'll celebrate 2 years in November.
Okay.
And we appreciate your family's support. And Willow Glen has been really receptive. I had a ball designing it. And yeah, it's been a nice labor of love.
It's been a fantastic place. It just really kind of finishes off that whole area there, of course, with Phil's. And I'm in Pet Express. I got a puppy. I'm in Pet Express all the time. But look, I wanted you on this program, and I wanted to talk about Willow Glen. I really appreciate that. It's been a pleasure being your neighbor, kind of just, pulling on the same rope like you're talking about to make San Jose the best it can be. You're definitely a role model for that. You and your family are just fantastic and truly some of the greatest people in this entire city. So thank you for being a part of this. And now let's see if we can get some people to listen in on us and keep building on the things that you've been working on. So thank you very much for being here.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. It's great to talk about Willow Glen. And it's an aspirational conversation. It isn't going anywhere. It's just got opportunities to be better. So thanks for giving it a voice.
All right, brother.
Thank you.
God bless.
Yeah.
And that's VANPOD number 7. 2 Michaels always make better than 1.